We have seen like in JavaScript and TypeScript, how do we basically create an object? So if you talk about inline type object, if you talk about using type aliases and using interface, are basically not available in JavaScript. So these three things are not available in JavaScript because JavaScript does not allow us to write the data type, right? JavaScript does not allow to write the data type, not available in JS. Data type is only allowed that you can also declare a data type only in terms of the TypeScript. So first thing, which is literal object, will be available in both JavaScript and TypeScript. Second, third, and fourth are not available in JavaScript because it does not allow you to write the inline code. Inline means um, along with the data type that you have to define. Okay, so this will not be applicable in terms of JavaScript. Now, constructor function will be applicable in JavaScript. Factor function will be applicable in JavaScript, and using classes will also be applicable in JavaScript. Okay, so most of the time, whenever we have to work with an object, we'll either be going for a literal object or we'll be going for using classes. So classes means you create a class, write a properties and method, and inside that we can get the values from classes by using an object, by creating an object for a class, right? And literal objects, we have already seen that whenever we define a value directly inside a variable, that is basically known as a literal or expression, right? And whenever we define object inside a curly braces as a value, a key and value pair, that will basically return as or create as an object in both JavaScript and TypeScript. Okay, so whenever we require, either we'll be going for a literal object or we'll be going for a classes. And constructor function will also be writing whenever and wherever we require. So inside a class, we'll also be creating a constructor. That is also we'll see in our today's session. Okay, but usually and most frequently, when we create an object, that will be for using a classes. Using inline, using alias, using interface are basically that you are trying to create a contract. You are trying to create right, some kind of contract where you say that I only require so and so keywords, so and so keys in terms of a value like number or string kind of. And if you try to define other things in that way, like it will throw you an error. Okay, so till now we have gone through with literal objects, inline type, using type aliases, interface, and let's see how do we go. Constructor function we have already seen earlier as well as in this, where we have gone through with the constructor function over here, a function that is used to create an object. And whenever a constructor function comes, right, whenever the name itself comes like a constructor function, constructor, not function, but constructor, that means we have to understand that it is talking about creation of an object. Okay, and also inside the constructor function, either you use a constructor function or you create a constructor inside a class. We have to initialize the value of a variable by using this keyword. And why this keyword? We have also gone through yesterday that this basically refers to an object of a class, object of a function, object of a class, or wherever we are trying to use. Okay, now let's go ahead and see the creation of an object using a class view. For that, let's create another file that I'll give the name as class.ts. Okay. Now, what is class? Till now that we have seen over here, every time we have just created a file, and then whatever the things that we had to write to learn the topic, we have gone through in writing inside the file itself, right? Now, what is class? Class is basically it's something which consists of properties and method, right? A class is basically you can say it is basically an object-oriented principles. That means whenever we work, basically JavaScript and TypeScript is a functional programming language, but it also supports object-oriented programming language. Okay, so whenever you go for an object-oriented, what is in the object-oriented? That means you have to use classes always. Either you go for printing a line of code or you go for writing hundreds of lines of code. You have to create a class. And to access the methods and properties, or even if you have to print the value, you have to create an object to access anything that you have to do. Either you can create, let's say, example inside a Java, you can create public static void main string args as a method, which will act as a um, runner point, right? Where the execution will start. So class is basically an object-oriented principle which will consist of methods and properties. Okay, methods is known as function, properties are known as variables. So methods are known as functions and properties are known as variables. Okay, now let's see how do we generally create a class. So class, if I talk about the definition, a class is in terms of a bookish definition, if I talk about a class is a blueprint for creating object. Class is a blueprint for creating object. That means whenever you use a class, that will help you to create an object. To get the to access the properties and method, we need to take the help of object that we'll be creating for a class. Okay. Now, how do we create a class? Is class creation of a class is exactly similar in however we create in the other programming language. Okay, creation of a class is exactly similar however we create in other programming language. Let's see the syntax of the creation of a class first. Syntax. Okay, so the syntax is let me start it with over here. Okay. So if you talk about the syntax for a class, so then it will start with a class. It will start with a keyword class, and then we'll have a class name. Class and then class name. We know that the class name, we will have to start it with a capital letter. Okay. Class name should always start with a capital letter. That means it will consist of a camel case letter. Camel case letter means if there are more than one word that it consists of, then every word will start with capital letter. Okay. So class name, and inside this class name, we can define a properties. What is properties? Properties are variables that we have gone through till now. Okay. Then we can define a methods. Methods are functions that we have seen till now. Okay, so what we can define inside the classes are basically class consists of two things. One is properties and other is methods. Okay, property we can define as a variable and methods we can define as a functions that we have gone through. Okay, and then you also have to close the curly braces over here. So this is basic syntax of the creation of a class. Basic syntax of creation of a class. But if you are also trying to, let's say you have created a properties, few of the properties that you have created, that means a variable you have created, how will you initialize these variable? So for that, we have to use constructor as well. For that, we have to use a constructor as well inside the function, inside the class. So basically class will consist of a properties. If you want to initialize the property, we have to initialize it inside the constructor. And then you can also write different kinds of methods as well. Okay, so for For example, when we create, let's say, login page, inside that login page, we can write a locators, which will be in the form of variables, right? And how do we initialize the locator? We'll initialize inside the constructor. Okay, once we go for creation of a framework, at that point of time, we'll see how do we do that. Okay, but for now, let's see a simple example that how do we create a class? How do we initialize the variable? How do we create a constructor? How do we create a method over here? And after that, how do we create an object for a class? Okay, let's see. It's very interesting, and you'll also come to know a few other concepts that we have not gone through till now. We have already gone through multiple times, but there are a slight difference when you work with a classes and all. Okay, so let's see an example over here. Okay, so how do we create a class? And just see the syntax, which is class keyword, and then we have to give a class name. So let's say I'll just give the class name as person. Okay, I've just given some random class name. So that I'll basically get the um, some kind of whatever I am trying to write over here related to a person. Okay, or you can also create a car class as well, or anything that we are looking out for to create over here in terms of classes. Okay, now, so let's say I'll just give, how do we start? After that, we have to start it with a curly braces. What are the things that we have to declare? Properties. Okay, so properties, as we are working with a TypeScript, right? So TypeScript allows us to define a, TypeScript also allows us to define basically a data type as well for any of the class, right? It allows us to define a data type for variables as well, right? But let's see how do we generally go about it and create a properties inside the classes. Okay, so then this is a property. So we can basically store some kind of properties related to person. Okay, we can basically store some kind of properties related to a person. But let me also show you the syntax over here for constructor and for methods as well, so that we can write it in a better way. Now, how do we declare a properties inside a class? Properties is variables, nothing else. I mean, properties nothing but variable that we try to declare. Okay, so how do you declare a variable? So for that, in general, how do we declare? So let's say let probably name equals to some value. Let's say TypeScript. This is how we declare that. In general, if we have to declare a variable or a variable in TypeScript or JavaScript, then we basically go for let name equals to TypeScript. Or in terms of TypeScript, we can provide the data type as well, right? But whenever we work with classes, okay, whenever we work with class, we have to define a properties or variable without using any keyword. Without using any keyword. That means you simply have to use name equals to TS without using any keyword. Simple, name equals to TS. Okay. Or if you are here, what did we do? Here we have directly assigned the value. And here we have simply assigned the value of a variable. Right. But if you do not want to assign the value, then we can simply say it as, let's say, declare a variable which is name. If you want to also provide the data type, you can provide it a data type over here. Okay. Okay. If you want to also provide the data type, you can also provide the data type over here as well. But again, that is not mandatory. Now, so whenever you try to declare it in this way, this becomes a public variable. This becomes a public variable. Now inside a class, there comes a few concepts. Okay, there will be private variable, and there will be a public variable as well. Will be a public variable as well. Now, what is private variable and what is public variable? So private variable means whenever whenever you try to declare a variable by using a private keyword. Okay, so like this, which is private keyword, variable name. If you want to give like data type as well, then data type equals to value. So this becomes a private variable. If you have mentioned a keyword known as private variable, then that is known as a variable which will be private to the class. Now, if something is a private to a class, that means you cannot access that particular variable outside of the class. That means you cannot access those variables outside of the class, those variables or those properties outside of the class. But if you have not mentioned private, then that means by default that is a public in nature. And if something is public in nature, you can easily access inside the class, outside the class, anywhere, wherever you want to access this particular variable. But how will you access? By creating an object. By creating an object. Okay. So public variable is something where you do not define a private keyword, and private variable is something where you define a variable which is private in nature. Okay. Now there will be a third type of variable as well, which is also known as static variable. Okay. For a static variable, we have to use a keyword known as static. For static variable, we have to use a keyword known as static. Okay. Now in this case, we have seen that static, like we have not seen till now that how do we declare a static keyword. Static basically comes inside the class itself. Okay, static keyword comes inside the class itself. So whenever we go for defining a class, inside the class, we can define multiple types of methods and properties. Okay, so how do we declare an static properties or static keyword? By using, let me, uh, properties, then we have this private variable, then we have this static variable. So how do you declare a static variable? It's simple, by using a static keyword. Now, what is difference between these variables that you see, right, which is private and public variable, are a class variable. This is also known as a class. This is also known as an instance variable. These two variables that you see, which is private and public variable, are also known as instance variable. Instance variable. What is meant by instance variable? That means to access these properties and methods, basically private you will not be able to access. But if you are trying to access a public variable, or if you are trying to initialize these variables, then we basically have to initialize these variable inside the constructor. Inside the constructor. And when constructor comes into picture, that means we can access those properties and method by using an object. Okay. Static variable belongs to the class. Static variable belongs to the class. Now, what is meant by belongs to the class? That means to access the properties and methods which is in the form of static, to access the properties and method which is in the form of static, you do not require any object to be created to access those static properties and method. Okay, you do not require any object to be created in terms of accessibility of a static method or static variable. Okay. Okay, I hope you are following. Right? Any question till now? Anything from any one of you? All good, right? Anyone can explain whether you're able to understand or not. Okay.
It's
So
pretty good.
Okay, so static variable, there are different types of variable, a private variable, a public variable, private variable and public, any variable which is non-static in nature. That means if you have not used a static keyword, that belongs to an instance variable, instance of a class. That means to access those properties and method, we have to create an object. Okay, but to access the static properties and static method, we can directly use by using a class name dot variable name or class name dot method name. Okay, I'll show you that as well. Now, whatever the variable that you have declared over here, which are instance variable like a private and public variable, those variable will get initialized inside the constructor. Those variable will get initialized inside the constructor. How do we create a constructor? Generally, in other programming language, what do we say is constructor name should be the same as class name, right? And that will be considered as a constructor. And what is constructor? Constructor is a special type of function which initialize the value of the variable at the time of object creation. At the time of object creation, it by default initialize the value of the variable. If you have provided any kind of parameter at the time of creation of an object, it will initialize those values. If you have not provided, then by default, for number, it will initialize 0. For a string, it will initialize empty string and so on. Okay, now how do we create a constructor in JavaScript and TypeScript? By using a constructor keyword. Simple. By using a constructor keyword, you will be able to create an object inside, create a constructor inside a JavaScript and TypeScript both. Okay. Now, what is the things that we'll be doing inside the constructor? So whatever the non-static method that you have declared, whatever the non-static method that you have declared, those variables will be initializing inside the constructor. Okay, what is the non-static variable that we have declared, which is, let's say, the first one is a var name. So that will go inside a constructor property, a constructor argument. That will go inside whatever the variable that you declared over here, which is non-static in nature. We also have to initialize those variables, right? How do we initialize? If you have not defined directly the variable, then how will you initialize? We will initialize it inside the constructor. Once we see an example, you'll understand. But whatever the variable that you have declared over here, and if you want to initialize that, we have to initialize that inside the constructor. Initialize means assign the value, initialize the value. Okay. Now, second is name property that we have written over here. Okay. And how do we initialize this value inside the constructor? It's a simple by using a this keyword. This dot var name equals to var name. This dot name equals to name. Okay, and that is what we had seen at the time of constructor function as well. So wherever the constructor words comes into picture, to initialize the value of the variable inside the constructor, we have to use a this keyword, because this belongs to an object, and whenever we create an object, that this keyword will refer to that particular object. Okay, so this becomes a constructor that we create in both JavaScript and TypeScript. Okay. Now there will be, as we talked about the variables, which is like instance variables and in static variable or a class variable. So there should be the similar way of the method as well, right? So method will also be of two types. One is instance method. Instance method. What is instance method? A method which will only be accessible by creating an object. A method which will only be accessible by creating an object. Accessible by object. This is like private, you cannot access anywhere outside of the class. This is also accessible by object. But static method will be accessible only, static variable will be accessible by using class name. Okay. Instance method again accessible by creating an object. Okay. How do we create a method in JavaScript and TypeScript? So in TypeScript, we know what is the difference, that we can provide the return type as well for the function, right? But till now, how did we create a function? By using a function keyword and then the name of the function, right? So function keyword and name of the function. We've created many a times, right? Keyword function and then name of the function. But class says that whenever you try to create a function inside the class, you do not need to write function um, function keyword as well over here. That means it does not require us to create a function keyword function by using a function keyword. Okay, so inside the class, how will you create the function? Simply whatever the name of the method that you want to write, whatever the name of the method it can be, that you can simply declare over there. Okay, so name of the method, let's say instance method. I'll just say it as instance method along with the parenthesis. If it is taking argument, that argument you can provide it over here. Okay, and you can also provide some kind of a return type if it is returning something. If it is not returning something, then whatever the code that we have to write, that will go inside the instance method. If it is returning something, then we have to use with return keyword. Okay, so this becomes an instance method where you do not have a keyword known as static. Also, inside the method, inside the class, when you try to declare a function or a method, you do not require a function keyword to be declared. You do not require a function keyword to be declared. Well, inside a class, whenever or wherever you provide a parenthesis, it will automatically understand that you are trying to create a function. Okay, but those kind of things you will not be able to do inside the the file. So you cannot say that, let's say function as we have given some kind of this one and then something that we have written over here, right? But you cannot write this outside of the class like this. In general, inside of the class, you have to write it in this way itself. So outside of the class, it says that cannot find name int, whatever it is. Okay, but inside of the class, you have to write it in this way, which is without keyword as a function. Okay. And what about static keyword, static method, right? So static method again will be accessible only by the class name. Accessible by class name. Now, how do we write a static method? Simple. You just have to append with a static keyword. That's it. Static keyword and whatever the code that you have to write, that's it. So static method, arguments, and if you are trying to get any kind of return type, then return type else void. If it is not returning anything, then it will be a void. But it should only be accessible. It is restricted. In terms of Java, if you might have worked earlier, you can access the static method and static property by using an object as well. That is not a good practice, but it allows you to access the properties and method by using object as well. But this is completely restrictable in JavaScript and TypeScript, that you have to access static properties and static method inside the whatever you have written inside the class by using the class name itself. Okay, so this is the complete syntax that we have to declare a class. This is the complete syntax that we have to declare a class. Now let's say I'll say it as a person will have a name. Okay, you can also declare, if you want to declare a data type, you can declare it over here. Person can have a name over here, and a person can have some kind of age. Age you can also provide it as a number over here. Okay. Now this data type is not mandatory. You can provide, or you it is again depending on however you are trying to follow. Okay. Now let's say if you want to declare a static method, static variable, You can also say it as static city as a string data type, and then I'm saying it as, let's say, some Delhi example, something that I've written over. Now, let's say if you want to make something as a private, let's say, let's say, is as a private over here. Okay, is as a private, and if you do not declare any keyword, that by default becomes public in nature. That by default becomes public in nature. Okay. Okay. So this is a public variable, this is a private variable, and this is a variable which is static in nature. You can also declare a variable which is like read-only variable. What is read-only variable? Let's say salary, which is in the form of number. Let's say what is 1 lakh rupees or whatever it is having. Okay. Now, what is meant by read-only? Read-only means you cannot change the value of the variable. Read-only means you cannot change the value of the variable. You can just access, but you cannot update the value of the variable going forward. Okay, if you want to update the value of the variable, you cannot update on the read-only part. Okay, this I'll show you. Again, this will talk about. Most of the time will not be using because if we only want to restrict someone to access the values but not update or modify, then we can provide it with a read-only variable. Now we have a static keyword, we have a read-only, we also have a private variable, we also have a public variable, right? So these two are an instance variable, which belongs to the object. Static keyword is a keyword which is, this also belongs to the object, which is read-only. Okay, but read-only basically will not allow you to update any values. But basically not allow you to update any values. It's just a read-only. That means it will not allow you to update the value. Now, static keyword will only be accessible by the class name. Okay. Now, how do we initialize the instance variable? What are those instance variable that we have? Name and age over here, right? Name and age. So those variable, we have to create a constructor. How do we create a constructor inside a class? By using a constructor keyword. By using constructor keyword, and it will accept a parameter, will accept an argument as whatever the variable that you have declared over here, whatever the properties that you have declared over here, and whatever the properties that you would like to initialize there. Whatever the property that you would like to initialize, you can provide it as an argument over here. Okay, and inside this constructor, we have to use this dot name equals to name, this dot age equals to age. Okay, if you're most of the time you will be writing the same variable name, whatever you provide it over here as an argument. So what happened in general? You see this dot name that you see over here, right? This dot name that you see over here becomes your variable name. This dot age that you see becomes your, again, variable name. And this name and age that you see are the values that you will be providing at the time of creation of an object. Are the values, this name and age are the values which you will be providing at the time of creation of an object. So how do we create an object? How do we create an object for a class? In other programming language, let's say in Java, we create a class object by using class name, object reference equals to, by using a new keyword, right? By using a new keyword, we can create an object. So new keyword and then class name. Okay. And if there are a constructor, and if constructor is accepting some kind of parameter, that parameter value, you have to provide it over here. Let's say name is Rahul and the age is 45. Okay, this is how you have to create in terms of an object in Java, not in JavaScript. Object in Java. But how do we create in JavaScript and TypeScript? You will be using a new keyword itself. New keyword to create a constructor, And then right hand side will be similar, which is class name. What is the class name that we have? Person as a class name. Okay, as soon as you have created this, whatever the parameter, whatever the argument that you have provided inside the constructor will be displayed over here. That is name as a string, age as a person number. But why do we create constructor? We create a constructor to initialize the value of the variable that you have declared over here. To just initialize the value of the variable. Okay. Anyways, static keyword, read only keyword, we might not use in terms of test automation. We'll be using like instance level variable itself. But let's see how do we do that. How do we access these kind of things as well? Okay, so it says that we require two parameters. Where is this two parameters coming from? Class does not accept any parameter over here, but where is these two parameters comes from? So these two parameters are coming from a constructor over here. These two parameters are coming from a constructor that we have defined over here. Okay, and here you can provide, let's say, name as a Rahul and then age as 30 example. So whenever you create an object, right, by using a new and then person, whenever you create an object, you have to store what is the object reference over here? Nothing, right? If you have to use later on, how will you use this? So you have to store it inside a variable, which I'll just say as, let's say, object or person object. Let's say person object equals to new person. So here in terms of Java, we will use a class name and then object reference. Here we can use any keyword, which is let or const and then object reference. Okay. Now, as soon as you create an object over here, or as soon as you create an object over here, and whatever the value that you have given inside the person parameter inside the object, what it will do is this Rahul will go and sit in the place of name over here. This 30 will go and sit in the place of age over here. So at this point of time, at line number 52, your variable name or your property name is this dot name. Okay, this dot name, whatever the name that you have defined, that becomes your this dot name. Okay, because how will you access this? By using an object reference. Object reference dot name. Object reference dot age if it is not private. Okay, so at this point of time, this becomes this dot name equals to Rahul. Whatever the value that you have given over here, because this go and sit in the place of first parameter, and this value will go and sit in the place of second parameter. So this becomes your first properties, and second is this dot age equals to 30. So now your properties that you have declared inside your class becomes this dot name, this dot age. And when you have already created an object, right? So this will get replaced by the object that you have created over. Okay. And if you have to access this, let's create one more function over here. And then we'll see. So now let's create another function. And how do we create a function inside a class without using a function keyword? So we'll say it as, let's say, person info, and inside the person information, we would like to print some kind of values. Like, let's say, what is the name of the person and what is the basically the age of the person as well. We can print it over here. Okay. So we'll simply say it as age colon this dot age. Okay, age colon this dot age. How do we get the value? How do we get the age property inside the function that you have defined? Why are we trying to use this dot name? Because when you just provide a name over here, this will not understand what is name that you have defined, what is age that you have defined. Okay, why it is saying age is not cannot find name age and cannot find name over here. Why it is saying like that? Because your variable now becomes, if you have used a constructor and if you have not initialized any value, your variable becomes this dot name, this dot age. All the instance variable which will be accessible by using an object, that will become this dot name of the variable, this dot name of the method that you are trying to use at the time of accessibility. Okay, so then in that case, you have to provide this dot name and this dot age over here. Okay, and let's say if you want to also create a static function, then you have to provide a static keyword and let's say some kind of things, some let's say greetings. I'll just say it as greetings inside the static function, and then something, some values. Hello, I am from some cities. Which city we basically belongs to? So that city we are trying to access it over here. And how are we trying to access? Are we trying to access the city over here? By using the class name. I'll show. I'll show you. Just let's not concentrate over here for now. Let's see what. Okay, so this is a static method. A static method, you can write anything, but you can access this static method inside static variables or static keyword. If you want to access this inside the class, then you can only access inside the static method itself. Okay, and how will you access the static method? By using the class name. Simple, by using the class name, not by using the class object. If you are not accessing anything by using the object, then it should not be written something like this, which is this dot city. You cannot write this dot city over here because static keyword does not belongs to the class. It does not belongs to class basically. So you have to access the static keyword by using a person. That means a class name over here. And if you want to also let's say also access the salary over here, you can also provide, let's say, salary. Inside the static function, also the concept is inside the static function, you cannot access non-static method. Inside the static function, you cannot access non-static variable, not method, variable. Why? Because non-static method belongs to the instance, belongs to the object. To access those non-static method, we have to use an object. Whereas to access the static variables and static method, we can directly use a class name. Okay. Again, feel free to stop me if you are not able to understand. You have to understand this concept. Okay, and then if you also are trying to access, let's say, salary, then you can simply say it as salary and then some salary that we have over here. So this dot salary is a read only, but this also belongs to the static. This also belongs to the object itself, right? Instance object, instance variable itself, because this is not static. So that also we have to access with this keyword. Okay, so what we have created a public variable, we have created a private variable, and we have also created a read-only variable, which also belongs to the instance itself, but you cannot update those variables. Okay, now you also have created a static variable, you have created a constructor, a normal instance method, and a static method. Now let's see how do we access these values. So first thing, when you are trying to access, let's say, the method that you have created as an instance, which is non-static, you can simply use by using person object, the object that you have created over here, dot method name. Whenever you try to access either properties or method, object dot. how did we access over here? How did we access from this particular object, which is object literal, right? By using object dot property, right? So we can simply use object, which is person object dot property, whatever the property that you are trying to access. Either it is method or it is a variable. Okay. Now, if you want to access a simple, let's try to run this and see what is happening in this case. Okay. So in this case, if you try to say that tsx and then class dot ts, right? So if you see over here, this will give us a value, whatever the value that we have printed inside the person info, which is name, this dot name, is this dot age, salary, this dot salary. But let's see, let's remove this name over here. Let's remove this over here. In terms of JavaScript, it will not throw you any kind of error. But in terms of TypeScript, it will throw you an error saying that I don't know what the age is, what the salary that you have defined over here, and what is the name that you have defined over here. And if you try to print this, this will throw you an error saying that I don't know where is the name, age, and salary. Why? Because those variables that you have declared belongs to the instance, belongs to the object. And whenever it belongs to the object, we have to use it by using this keyword. Also, you have initialized inside a constructor. So then in that case, that becomes your left side, whatever you have declared becomes your variable name. Right side, whatever you have declared becomes your values. Okay, so that is where we have to write it with this dot name, this dot age, and this dot salary. Okay, in terms of a JavaScript, it will not throw any kind of error. It will just throw you that it will return you the value which is undefined. Okay, you can just practice it out, or let me convert this to JavaScript, which is by using tsc class.ts. Do not worry, it will just convert our tsc. It will simply convert our TypeScript file into a JavaScript file by using class.js. So if you see the class.js, however we have written over here, it has declared in the same way. However we have written over here, it has declared in the same way. Okay, so here it has taken a function in terms of a function constructor, but it has basically converted in a bit different way. But let's see how do we generally convert whenever you are trying to convert this. So this has used a keyword over here. So we can simply copy paste the value from here, which is class. I'll change the person to person1. So person to, or let's say person itself. And we know that this will not accept any data type. So we do not have to define any data type over here. Okay. And also private are not, you cannot provide a private or read-only variable in terms of JavaScript. Private and read-only are only accessible inside a TypeScript. Says that the private modifier can only be used in TypeScript file, or read-only modifier can only be accessed in the TypeScript file itself, because TypeScript also allows the complete oops concept as well. Okay, so you have to basically declare it in this way. Then you have to remove the data type wherever you have declared, because that is not supported in TypeScript, JavaScript. Okay, now let's say if you just say it as name over here, you say it as age over here, and then you say it as salary over here. You see that it is not returning us any kind of, it is not throwing any kind of error over here. But in case of this, if you just remove, let's say this for any of the things, it is returning us, because TypeScript is a statically typed language, which will throw us an error at the time of writing the code itself. That will throw us an error at the time of writing the code itself. Okay, so I'll just say it as, let's say the name of the object is person. And how do you access whenever you have to access the methods and properties? How will you access over here? So in this case, if you try to run this by, how do we run the JavaScript file? by using node space file name. What is file name? Class.js. Okay. So in this case here, here also it is throwing, but it's saying that name is not defined. Age is not defined. Salary is not defined. That means undefined value. Okay. But this will throw you at the time of execution. This will not throw you any kind of error at the time of writing the code. Okay. But static concept are available in both JavaScript and TypeScript. In private, like access modifier that you have given over here, which is private read only, are only applicable in terms of object, which is like TypeScript itself. Okay, and that is not applicable in terms of JavaScript. Okay, so now when you try to access this, you will get the value, whatever the value that we have given for name, whatever the value that we have given for age, and the other value that we have given for salary over here. So name is Rahul, age is 30, and salary is whatever the salary that we have declared over here. Okay. Now, how will you access the static keyword that it belongs to, or how will you access the static method that you have created over here, right? So let's see one thing. So what we'll do is we'll try to access an static keyword by using the object itself, static method by using the object itself. Now see, as soon as you print dot and you start writing the greetings as a name of the function, it is not suggesting. It is not suggesting anything over here. Why? Because it says that property greetings does not exist on type person. Why? Because static keyword and static variable, static variable and static method will belongs to the class, not belongs to the instance. That means instance means object, not belongs to the object. Okay, so you cannot access static variable or static method by using the object that you have created over here. Other static method is this city, right? So you cannot access that as well. It will not give you any suggestion over here. But when you try to access this using the class name, see, it is saying, okay, we have a city available over here as well, which is available inside the class. Okay, so again, you can try to print over here, let's say person.city, and whatever the city that you have declared, it will return us the value for that, which is Delhi over here. Okay, now how will you call the static function that you have defined? By using again class name dot static method, and this will also define us the value, which is hello, I am from Delhi. Okay, hello, I am from whatever the city that we have, whatever the city that we have declared. Okay, so always remember that if you are trying to declare a static method and static variable, you always have to directly use the class name dot static method to access and static variable to access. Okay, now we also have declared one thing over here, which is person object dot salary. Okay, so this will give you the salary of a person, which is console dot log and then person object dot salary. Okay, so if you see this, as this also belongs to the instance variable, so it will return us the value, which is whatever the value that you have given over here. Okay. But what happened in this case? So let's say we have a name that we have given over here, right? By using the object, you can change the name as well. By using the object, you can also change the name as well. How will you change the name? By simply saying it as object reference that you have created dot name equals to, let's say, John. Okay, equals to John. What will happen is this will just update the name that you have over here, because this dot name is our property. When you say this dot name, that means this belongs to person object dot name, and for that you are assigning some value over here. Now if you see, earlier we were getting name as Rahul, is as 30 and some other things, but now you will get name as John over here, name as John that you have declared. Okay, so you can change the properties, like whatever the properties instance variable that you have declared, that you can change. But If you have marked it as a property, read only, then you cannot change that. Cannot assign to salary because it is a read only property. That means you cannot update the read only property that you have declared over. And that is what the use of read only key. Read only means it will not be modifiable. Okay, you cannot modify or you cannot update any point of time. That becomes completely read only. Okay, so this is the complete concept of the class and how do we create an object using a class. Okay, now let's see a simple example for how do we use an inheritance concept. So what is inheritance? Inheritance is a concept where we acquire the properties from one class to another. That means we have a parent, right? So there will be one parent class, and from that parent class, we can get all the properties and method. We have a parent. From parent, we can get whatever the property that they belongs to, right? So that will either automatically or however you can acquire that, right? So let's say I'll say it as inheritance.
Praveen,
Yes.
Praveen, actually, I'm getting a bit confused here.
Mhm.
So, class and object creation, can you give one practical example, w- when we will call object is a static variable and public variable? So, like, it will be clear, like, with example.
Hmm. Right. Anyways, like we'll be going through in detail this once we create a framework. But the example is like once you go for a framework generation, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you go for a framework creation, we'll be creating multiple pages. Right. When we go for a framework creation, we'll be using a multiple pages over there. Right. In that, whenever we create a page, that will create as a class. And whatever the variable that you have declared, you will be declaring as a you will be declaring over here for the locators. Whatever the locators that you will be writing, you will be declaring as a variable over here. And you also have to initialize the locator because you will be using inside different methods. Let's say, let me show you probably over here. Okay, this example I'll show you at the end today. Okay, real-time uses I'll show you, but the variable that you will be declaring over here will be the locator, and that locator you can initialize over here by writing the complete locator. Okay, and this locator you can create different methods. Let's say fill the username, fill the password, click on login button, or valid login scenario. So inside that you can create a method valid login scenario, and whatever the step comes like fill the username, fill the password, fill the and click on login button. So for filling the username, you will be writing a username locator. Filling the password, you will be writing a username password locator. And then for clicking on submit button as well, you will be writing a locator for submit button, right? And those you will be using inside the methods wherever it requires.
Okay,
Okay.
got it.
And and in terms of a private and public is, let's say when you try to write an assertion like verification, and at that point of time, if you want to check if an element is available or not. Okay. So this concept you'll be clear once you go for a framework. So you cannot write locators inside your test class. You have to write locators inside your page class. So that locator you will be writing as a public so that you can access that outside of the classes as well. So you can access that outside of the classes. Now we have made it as a private, right? Private page. If you try to access that, let's say person object dot age. So it says that it is not accessible because property age is a private and only accessible within class itself. You cannot access outside of the class. So whenever you are trying to write a locator which you think that you have to access outside of the class, there you can use this as a
Yeah.
public. Okay. Now let's see a simple example of a inheritance concept over here. So whenever we go for creation of a page object model framework, most of the time, maximum things that we'll be using is most of the times or maximum things that we will be using is something known as inheritance. Mostly you will be going for inheritance concept, not more than that. Inheritance means acquiring the properties. Okay. Apart from that, you will not be using any other OOPS concept. Okay. In terms of a TypeScript and JavaScript, OOPS concept are allowed, but most of the time you'll be creating a class and you probably can use inheritance concept. Now let's talk about what is inheritance concept over here. Right. Let's talk about what is inheritance concept over here. So we have declared an inheritance.ts. Right. So now let's see what is inheritance. So inheritance, the definition of the inheritance is inheritance. If I talk about in terms of a definition, it is the process by which one class can inherit the properties and method from other class. Okay, so what is inheritance? That means we can get the properties from our parents as well, right? So that is what it says, that you can get the properties and methods, right? Properties and methods. It is a process by which one class can inherit properties and method by other class. So this is a process by which one class can access the properties and methods from another class. Okay. Now, what is meant by that? So to work with inheritance concept, we require two class to be created. To work with inheritance concept, we basically require two class to be created. Let's say example, we have a class which is car class over here. Okay, and this car consists of let's say some values, which is name, year, and color for a car. And how do we define that? By using this dot name, this dot year, and this dot properties, this dot color. This is the three things that we have declared over here. So, we have defined an argument, which is name, year, and color. But it is complaining over here that where did you define the variable that you are trying to access? Says that property name does not exist on the type car. So you have to provide over here, which is name. You also have to declare over here year, and you also have to declare over here car. Whatever the properties that you are trying to access by using a this dot name, you have to define it over here, and that is applicable only in terms of TypeScript. Okay, when you try to do this inside over here, there is no need of writing this name and age as well. Okay, even if you're not required, this will be automatically get initialized inside the constructor. So that is not mandatory in terms of writing inside the JavaScript, but inside the TypeScript, we have to also provide whatever the argument that you are trying to provide it inside the constructor, you have to provide it over here. Okay. Now let's say I'll write a method again, which is let's say car start method. Some dummy things I'm writing over here, which is console.log. The car is starting. So it is saying duplicate identifier car. Did we declare any time? I'll just change it to car one over here. Yes. Okay. Or let's say cars. I'll just say it as car. Okay, it is also saying like you have to provide the data type, you have to provide some other things and all. So why it is saying cars over here? Because I believe like cars, we have defined it inside the object. We have defined a cars as an interface over here. So it is saying, are you trying to use the interface that you have defined? So that is why it is throwing over here an error. Okay. So we have created this class car1, and we have defined some properties and one particular method. Now, how do we access? Again, by using by creating an object. But we are trying to talk about the inheritance concept over here, right? So I'll again create another class. Let's say I'll say it as class name is BMW. Okay, class name is BMW over here. Now, how do we get the properties and method of this particular class? So you have to basically get the properties and method from this class inside this particular class. That is what known as inheritance concept. Okay, so class BMW extends the car class name that you have defined earlier. Okay, when you use a extend keyword, that means you are now getting all the properties and method that are available inside this particular car class. Okay, and you'll also be creating a constructor over here, and that constructor you have to basically, let's say, define a model over here for this class property, model for this class property, any kind of model that can have a BMW can have. Okay, now you see one thing over here. Here inside the parent class also we have a constructor, and inside the child class also we have to create a constructor. If you are trying to initialize something, then inside all the classes you have to create a constructor. Okay, now constructor that you have defined, if you are trying to extend over here, the constructor that you have defined over here will automatically be available inside your child class as well. Now this becomes your child class and this becomes your parent class. Okay, a parent cannot access the properties of a child. A parent cannot access the properties of a child, but a child can access the properties of parent over here. So this car1 becomes parent, this BMW becomes the child. You can define the other properties over here as well for the child, but other thing that you see that is having inside the parent class, which is name, year, and color, are by default available over here. If you do not define this, then it will throw you an error saying that you are trying to extend it. So you also have to use the constructor that you have declared for your parent class. So you also have to use the constructor, the variable that you have defined for the constructor class. That means
Praveen,
parent
what
class.
is the difference between super and this keyword?
I'll come to that point. I'll come to that. Okay, that is why I'm trying to explain all this concept that the constructor will be applicable over here as well. Okay, so whatever the properties that you have defined over here, that should also automatically come when you try to define a constructor inside the child class. Okay, and now you see something it have been written over here as super name, year, and color. This is not defining a model over here. This is not defining a model, right? Model is a part of this child class. Model is basically a part of this child class, not a part of your parent class. Okay, so this keyword basically belongs to the current class object. This keyword, this that you see, belongs to the current class object, and super keyword belongs to the parent class object. Super keywords refers to your parent class. So if you hover over on this, you can see that this is this value that we have defined over here. This means what is this? So this is referring the value that you have defined over here, which is this dot name equals to name, this dot year equals to year, this dot color equals to color, by using a super keyword. Okay, now one more thing over here. So you cannot say like this, which is this dot name equals to name. You cannot say like this over here because this name does not belongs to you. You are getting it from your parent, which is car1 over here. So whenever you are trying to get some kind of properties from your parent, you have to use a super keyword over here. You have to use a super. Super belongs to the parent class, and you can see that it is referring to the constructor that are available inside car1, which is having name, year, and color. Okay, so super keyword belongs to the parent class that you are trying to access. This keyword belongs to the current class object. Super keywords belong to the parent class object. Okay, the difference between this and super is this belongs to the current class and super belongs to your parent class. Parent class means whatever the class that you are trying to extend. How do you achieve the inheritance concept? How do you get the properties and method from one class to another class? By using an extends keyword. By using an extends keyword. That means it says that the class that you have declared BMW is also extending the car1 class over here. Okay. Now, what is the benefit of this? Let's see over here. So you can also create a method. You can also create a method over here saying that, let's say, car stop. Okay. And then you can select the car is stopping. Okay. So what happened is we have declared few variables, which is name, year, color, which belongs to the car property, car1 class. And then we have a model which belongs to the BMW class. Okay. Car1 class is also having a method which is car start. And when you use this extends keyword, this car starts will automatically get imported inside the inside the child class, which is BMW over here. Now, what I'm trying to say over here is, let's say, how will you access the properties and method? By creating an object, right? So let's create an object for a child first. Which class is your child class? BMW is a child class, which is extending the parent, which is this one. Okay. So now let's create an object for BMW class over here. And what are the things that BMW require? See, name, year, color, that all are coming from parent class now, because you have extended the class. So you also have to provide all the parameter that you have declared inside the parent class. Okay. So name, let's say, I'll just say it as BMW. And what is the year? Year is 2025. And what is the color? Color, let's say it is a red color. And then we have something which is, let's say, i7 series. Okay, what are all these properties? These three property that you see over here will go inside the car class. Will go inside the car class. This BMW, basically it will automatically go to the BMW class itself, right? So this BMW will go inside and sit in place of name, 2025 in place of year, red in place of color, and i7 in place of model. But then a super keyword comes into picture, right? So super keywords will go and initialize the value inside the parent class. So this name, year, and color will get initialized over here by using this dot name, this dot year, and this dot color. Okay, and the model that you have given over here, which specifically belongs to the child class, so that will get initiated over here. Okay, and when we create an object, we have to store it inside a variable. So I'll say it as, let's say, BMW in a lowercase letter. Okay, now when you extend something inside a child class, that means whatever you define inside the parent class are automatically available inside your class as well. That means you can, let's say, create, uh, I'll also create, let's say car information over here. Car info is a method. From here, we are trying to get all the values, which is the car name is this dot name, year is this dot year, and color is, let's say, dollar, and then this dot color. Okay, by now you should be knowing that why do we use this dot color? Because this belongs to the current object over there. This has to be rendered over here. this. So this is okay. So something have been interrupted. 1, 2. This will get ended over here. 3. This will also get ended over here. So we also have to end this at this one. So this you should be familiar. We have used a backtick to call the different properties inside the string. Okay. Following the session, right? Or is it getting harder? How is it? If you all three are over here, that means you're trying to understand something. Right, Abhishek, are you getting anything over here?
Yeah, little complex, but we need to practice, Praveen, to get into line. Little
Right.
complex. Yeah.
Right. So in the initial stage, you have to, anyways, like inheritance, I've just given you an extra kind of things so that you can understand, but this will mostly will not be using. Only sometimes whenever it requires, we'll be using. But this is how the class was easy, right? Class concept is clear, right?
Yeah, class is clear, Ravi.
Right. So inheritance mostly will be not using, but what happened in the inheritance concept is that belongs to two different class. Their concept comes as two different class. One is this class. If you understood the class, that means this is okay, right? And one is this class. If you have understood this particular class, that means that is also okay, right? So these are two different class where we have created variables, properties, and few methods over here. Now, in terms of inheritance concept, what happened is you are automatically getting whatever the properties and method that you have created inside parent class. So this is your parent class and this is your child class, right? So by using an extend keyword, you are trying to get all the properties and method that belongs to a car1 class. Now let's see a magic over here that we have created an object which is object reference as BMW, right? So we have a method inside the BMW class which is dot car stop. So how do we call this car stop? By simply BMW dot car stop, right? And if you try to execute this, this will automatically return us a value, whatever is the BMW. So we have to give inheritance.ts. The car is stopping, right? And now you see that these two, which is car start and car info, belongs to the parent class, belongs to the another class, which is car1. And this car1 we are trying to extend inside this BMW class. That means whatever the methods and property are available inside car1 are automatically available inside BMW as well. So you can, by using a BMW, you can get the car start method as well. And by using a BMW, you can also get the car info as well. But these two methods does not belongs to the BMW class. These two methods belongs to the car1 class, but that car1 you are trying to extend. Let's say, just remove this car1 over here. You'll get an error over here. I'll just remove that, but you will also get the error over here saying that property card start does not belongs to the BMW. Because these two methods are not available inside BMW. These two methods are available inside over here inside the car1. And how do you directly get these methods and properties that you have declared inside car1 to the BMW is by using an extend keyword over here. Okay, whenever you use extend keyword to get the constructor value, you have to use a super keyword. And always remember that the super keyword will be the first line of code inside the constructor. If you are using a super keyword to get the constructor from your parent class, that should be the first statement. You cannot write this after this. You cannot write that. It should be the first one. Okay. Now, how do you get this car start and car info from car1 to BMW? By just using an extends keyword. Okay, that is the concept of inheritance, that you are not only you will be able to access your class properties, but you will also be able to access the other class properties as well. Now, what is the usable things over here? So let's say we can write some customized method inside our framework, which is, let's say, get text from an element, click on an element. Okay, all those methods will be writing inside a base class. And whenever or wherever we have to use inside any of the class, we can simply extend that particular class. Extend base class wherever you have written customized method. And those method will automatically be available wherever you are trying to extend, trying to use the extend keyword for base page. Okay, that is basically the use of inheritance. I do not go through in detail for this inheritance concept because we mostly do not use. I have like in my current organization, we have developed a complex framework where we have 11,000 test cases on Playwright. Again, we have never used, sometimes only whenever it requires to call the locator, which is common for like both of the classes. At that point of time, to use the locator, we use extend keyword, because whatever the property that you create over here, that will automatically get it inside the other class as well. So by using the other class constructor itself, you will also be able to get the name of the car. Okay, so you can also get the name of the car by using BMW, which is child class constructor, a child class object. Whereas this name belongs to name, let's say, understand that the name is just a name is a locator that you have inside one class. And this locator you are trying to use inside the other class. So there are two ways in which you can do. One is you can simply create an object for this class inside this particular class and get the value. Or second is if you have multiple values to get, you can also extend that. Okay, so that is basically the concept of class and inheritance in both JavaScript and TypeScript. In both JavaScript and TypeScript, these are same. These concepts that we have gone through are same in both JavaScript and TypeScript. Only the things is that in JavaScript, you do not have to declare a variable at the top when you are trying to use inside the constructor. Now I also said you that I'll show you the exact example wherever we are trying to use, right? The constructor, the variables, and so on. So this is a TypeScript file. This is a TypeScript page, which is a login page. And inside this, we have to write locators and method related to login page only. Okay, so these are the variable that we have defined. Locators related to login page. These are the variables that we have defined over here. Few of them are private, few of them are public, which I will homepage identifier error message I'll be using inside the test file. I'll be using that inside our test file. Let's say this one. Inside this test file, I'm using this homepage identifier and error message, right? So if this should have to be a private, then this will not be accessible over here. We'll not be able to access. That is where we have basically given a private and public variable. If you do not provide, then public. And all these variables that we have declared over here have been initialized inside the constructor that we have created. Page is getting initialized over here. Yes.
So Praveen, what is that constructor page colon page? Uh,
This is a argument that we are trying to get. This is just an
and
argument.
so why we have used colon, and is page a data type or something like that?
This page is a data type. Yes.
Okay.
You can also remove it from here. It is not mandatory in terms of to write the data type, but that is page is a data type. What is page? That you'll come to know in terms of once we start Playwright. So page is a page is a fixture that are available inside a Playwright, which help us in launching the browser, creating the instance of a browser. Okay, so that is what the argument that we have taken over here. And others were variable that we have over here, we have simply assigned it with some other values. We have initialized the value over here. Whatever the variable that we have declared over here, by using, you can see we have username, we have password, login button, and other things. This dot username, this dot password, this dot login button. And what is this? these are the value that we have initialized over here. These are the value we have to write it, because these values should not come from once we create an object, right? Once we create an object, this value should not be coming from, because locator, we have to write it beforehand itself, before utilizing this. And that is why we have not taken inside the constructor as an argument. Okay. And this is like we are trying to initialize, and you can see like we have created a number of objects, and number of method over here. And these methods are trying to use the variables that we have defined inside the constructor. This dot page, this dot username, this dot password, this dot login button. Okay, and some other things over here. Okay, and when you try to access this outside of the class, only the public variable will be able to access. So we can create an object. How do we create an object? We have just created an object over here. And this page fixture that you see, this is a page fixture that are available inside. It's isolate page instance. That means it will create a page. We'll be starting from our next session onwards, the playwright. So we'll see how does it go. Okay, so this we have created an object, and whatever the method that we have to call, we have called by using login page dot variable name, and so on. Okay, that is the use of classes in general. Okay, so that's about it. I'll suggest you to see, just going through it will not give you, but you have to practice it or to understand in a better way. Okay, so I'll not take the session tomorrow, which is again Saturday. Keep practicing. I will not have a session tomorrow. So practice it out as much as possible. And then if you have any doubt, again, come back to me. It is not something that we have finished the TypeScript, or it is not something that we have finished the JavaScript and TypeScript. Today is a formal finishing class for the TypeScript. But if there are any concept that you are not aware of, or that you have some kind of issues in understanding, just let me know. I'll repeat that session as well.
Praveen, in the array, do we have collection concept in JavaScript or TypeScript?
No,
Like
what do we generally do is we use an array for the collection, which is like collect number of variable that you are trying to use, and then we have an object which works as a map concept.
okay,
Object that we
mapping.
have gone through is something like key and value pair, right? And that is what the map is in terms of a data structure.
Okay, like in Java have many type of like collections, hash map,
No,
and
that
linked list.
those we do not require over here.
Oh.
Those you do not get. Everything will be covered. Whatever you generally covered by using the other concept in terms of JavaScript will be covered by using array and object concept over here.
Okay.
Okay. So just keep practicing it out and let me know if you have any questions for any of the topic. I'll repeat. But from next Saturday as well, I'll take the session, because in the first week of May, I am not sure whether I have informed or not. In the first week of May, probably hoping like we should be able to complete the session till then. If not, then in the first week of May, I will be visiting my Dubai office. So for those period, I'll not be available, which is 1st, 2nd, 5th, 6th, and 7th. Okay, so to cover up that, I'll just take like whatever the Saturday will be before that, to extend the session and try to cover it up. But I believe like till then we should be able to finish it off the session. But if not, then in those like 5 days of period, I'll be on leave. Okay. Right. So that's it. But I'd request